Which
Hi
one's
everyone, and welcome to the free Assange online vigil series. I'm Taylor Hudak, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Andrew Smith and Steve Poikinen. Now we have a very special episode this evening for you all. Today does mark our 1 year anniversary that we have been doing these vigils through Action for Assange. But before we get to our two very special guests of the evening, here are some stats for you guys. Today is day 3,493 of the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange. It was also 446 days since he was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy and then taken into Belmarsh prison for a $4.2 billion IMF loan. And also we have 69 days left until the second phase of Julian Assange's trial, or rather his rendition hearing, as we like to call it here. And also today is day 1,123 of the incarceration of Reality Winner, and 109 days that Chelsea Manning has been freed from prison. So we have a lot to get into tonight. And before I open it up to my co-hosts, I do want to introduce two very special guests of the evening. We have returning guest Ray McGovern, and then we are also joined by Bill Binney. I want to thank you both so much for joining us. How are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Not bad.
Thank you. So Steve and Andrew, why don't you kick it off here?
Well, today is pretty special here at the Free Assange Vigil. Let me reposition my microphone here. We've been doing this for a year now. This is our 52nd consecutive week of the Free Assange Vigil series, and I'm a little bit blown away that we've all been able to not go completely insane throughout this entire process. We do have a GoFundMe that we're circulating. We are crowdfunding to get back to Washington, D.C. to hold 3 weeks of events and protests, demonstrations, teach-ins, panels throughout the entire process of the show trial and broad daylight attempted kidnapping of Julian Assange that's taking place in September at the Old Bailey. We just found that out, the location of the venue. So if you can, please donate to that GoFundMe. If you can't, please share the link because getting it out there does help quite a bit. We're about 20% of the way from our goal, and every little bit helps. And with that, I'll toss it over to Andre.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to take a second to shout out the actions that we have set up for this week, but also to say happy birthday to Julian. This Friday, July 3rd, is Julian Assange's birthday, and it'll mark roughly 450 days that he's spent inside a Belmarsh prison when his birthday arrives. So part of our action this week is to ask people to please get out and do something for his birthday. Whether you want to register a formal event with Candles for Assange or you just want to do some type of personal protest, that's the big thing we're trying to push. But also we have 3 different links in there for people to send articles to their local media companies, whether it's newspaper, radio, or TV. So we'll be dropping those links in the chat for everybody as well. But yeah, I did just want to start out this evening by just opening the floor to you, Bill, because you're a new guest here on the vigils. If you could just talk a little bit about to take us off tonight, Julian Assange's impact on your life and the work that he's done and the work that you've done trying to advocate for him as well.
Well, I think Julian Assange is kind of unique in the world. He's kind of probably one of the only publishers that's ever been telling us the truth consistently. I mean, the rest of the world is lying through their teeth to us. It's just crazy, the lies they expect us to believe. Like the whole thing was predicated on Russiagate. And by the way, one of the reasons they keep this Russiagate thing going is they want to charge Julian Assange with the 1917 Espionage Act, which means you have to name a foreign state as a cooperator, as the one being cooperated with by the traitor, so to speak. And that carries the death penalty with it, by the way. So, and the British are not supposed to extradite anybody that to a country where they might be tried and given the death penalty. You know, but I mean, it's behind the scenes, shake, hands under the table. You give, we'll give, and all that stuff. That's what's going on between the U.S. and the U.K. In fact, that's the Five Eyes. The whole Five Eyes agreement is that way. They'll all agree to do that together. And you can see it in the wars we participate in, and who supports the wars and so on, who sends troops and things like that. So, I've been fighting the same thing here internally because of this spying that allows them to do all kinds of things around the world. Once you have mass spying on everybody, you know everything about everybody, and you can at least begin to infer their intentions and capabilities. And from that, you can then take preemptive actions. That's what they did in the Iraq war and all that stuff too. It's just crazy things that people are doing. And I've been objecting from that from the beginning in 2001 when they started this. And my stuff fell on deaf ears down there. I even went in to talk to, eventually Pompeo when he was director of CIA. And he kept saying, well, if we released any of this information about it, it's all classified. I said, well, I will. Let me remind you what President Kennedy did in the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. When he had the U-2 photographs of the missiles, Russian missiles in Cuba, he released them into the UN to show that these missiles were really there. And that was highly classified. And then Reagan, after the shoot down of the KAL airline over Korea, over Kamchatka in Russia. It was very close to that, but the Russians shot it down. Well, he released to the UN again the Japanese collection and translation of the Russian air controller ordering the fighter to shoot the plane down. And those were the kinds of things they declassified and showed in the United Nations to the world. And that was done because it was something that they felt was clearly an act that could be justifying war. So now what they're talking about is interfering in all of this, getting our people killed and all that. They're trying to stir this up again, stir this old historical, animosity towards the Russians. And they should remember that from World War II, the Russians were our allies, and they took the brunt of the Nazi war. The war against Nazi Germany the brunt of it was taken, 80% of it, I would say, was taken by the Russians. We took the brunt of the Japanese, but they took the brunt of the Nazis. And we keep forgetting that, and we keep trying to trump them up as no pun intended there, because Trump has nothing to do with this. It's all the deep state and all these criminals that we have, they're not elected. These are bureaucrats, and they never change. They're always there, and they don't move around. We should fire a lot of them and start over, at least 5 levels of them, in my view, anyway. But no, this is the kind of nonsense that's going on behind the scenes. It's how can you create a new Cold War so we can be swindled out of trillions of dollars and maybe get in and kill millions of people? This is insane.
That's a fantastic way of putting it. I tell people all the time that we live in a cartoon, because what has been happening over the past a couple of decades of my life has just been increasingly cartoonish. Before we get into the bulk of the conversation for tonight, which will center a lot about the role that the surveillance state and intelligence agencies play in the media, I do want to touch a little bit on Julian's case management hearing yesterday, because there were a couple of revelations that kind of floored me. And the first one was the concierge for the U.S. State Department, Magistrate Vanessa Brayster, was not given a copy of this superseding indictment, nor was Julian's legal team. It was released directly to the press by the Justice Department without anyone else involved in the case being able to take a look at it. And I'd like to get a couple of takes from you gentlemen on this. Ray, we can kick off with you.
Well, this is the one time that I wished I was a lawyer. I can't really explain how that could possibly be legal, not to give the defense and the prosecution and the judge copies of the superseding indictment or charges. So, I guess I'm not surprised. because what I've seen here is a total disregard for legality. You would think that there would be a little shame left on the part of the British. I mean, after all, it was just 800 years ago. I was just a boy at the time when the Magna Carta was wrested from from King John. Right now, who did that? Well, it was some gutsy English, highly educated for that time nobles. Okay, and they got all these habeas corpus. They got all these rights. They got the king to agree to them. Now that was 800 years ago. My God, have they no respect? Have they no sense of history? What they've done is sort of said, well, you know, that happened 800 years ago, but now this is now, and what Washington tells us we just do, and it's just really fine with us because we get along just great, you know. And then there are the Five Eyes, and there are five others or seven others. Man, you know, when Edward Snowden talks about turnkey tyranny, that's us. Turnkey tyranny is us. So, as Bill has charted, I mean, Bill has not only written and spoken about this, but he's taken those slides that Ed Snowden took out with him to Hong Kong, and he's traced the roots. And you know, I had to be persuaded when Bill told me, Ray, they collected all. I said, come on, Bill, all the telephone calls, all the give me a break. He says, no, Ray, they can. And they do. They don't read them all. They don't listen to them all, but they store them all. They can just easily call them up. Okay. All of them. So I said to myself, wow, well, how do you know that? And he said, well, I knew that for 800 years, but I couldn't say it until Ed Snowden came out with those charts, with those view. We used to call them view graphs, right, Bill?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So Bill took those things and what he knew about AT&T and Verizon and all that stuff, he mapped them out, and he knows exactly not only where they come in, where they go out, where they're monitored, but also the trace routes. Where, you know, each one of the correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, I've learned it all from you, but each one of these little emails is broken down into little packets, right? And the packets are labeled so that they can reassemble at the end. Okay. Well, there are trace routes all along the internet now to trace where these things are, how they get there. And so, yeah, they should know, they can know, and they do know. And so what Edward was saying, Ed Snowden, was, look, you know, this is really, really dangerous. And who is the guy? Now it's sort of widely recognized. Who is the guy that got Ed Snowden safely out of Hong Kong, where, you know, a zillion police, Chinese and Hong Kong police looking all over for him? It was Julian Assange. Now, that's no secret. That's been in the movie. But when I saw Julian, I guess it was the second time I saw him in that embassy, I said, Julian, you know, I admire a lot of things that you've done, but nothing more than successfully pulling all those levers, calling in all those chits, getting Sarah Harrison to get to Hong Kong and get Ed free. Now, he's not totally free. He's in Russia, so you know he can't come home, but he's alive, he's well, and he's making a major contribution to this whole issue. So when I said that, Julian is, you know, is not the kind of guy that jumps up and flails around, but he did. He got off the couch and he said, yes, we had to make it possible for one person. We couldn't succeed with Chelsea Manning, but we did. Yes, we did at Snowden. Now they're accusing Sarah Harrison and others of being accomplices to this great crime, of telling the truth, of making sure that the American and other publics know what's really going on behind the back of their governments. Their governments being not very reliable when it comes to the truth, and that's an understatement of the century.
Yeah.
So Bill, if I could get, I kind of want to get your general impression of just what kind of a legal system that we have here in the U.S., where the indictment is released through the media, and it's the superseding indictment. The way that I understand it is that they've expanded upon the cybercrime charges because it is getting more and more difficult for the Department of Justice to pretend that this isn't a political persecution. So they've tried to throw the entire kitchen sink, a decade's worth of smears and half-truths and rewriting of history on the backs of testimony from two known snitches, one of whom is a convicted pedophile, and they're calling that good enough.
And the other of whom is running CrowdStrike. Just
Yeah. Oh, well, let's put it this way. I did get a request through another party to see if I was willing to openly debate CrowdStrike on the issue of data and whether or not the Russians in fact did this or not. So I said, certainly I would be glad to. I said, all the data I looked at and analyzed with other people is already published on the web. Anybody in the world can look it up and see it and analyze it themselves. So the only thing I would have as a prerequisite is I'd need to have all the data that CrowdStrike has used to arrive at the conclusions they had, so I could do a peer review of their data and see if I could then shoot holes in their argument. And I never heard back from them. That's been about
Can't imagine why.
That's a year ago, okay? So, but in the meantime, we've come up, our people over in the UK looking at stuff, and we've been talking to them, working with them on it, and we've come up with several very clear, I mean, I put these in affidavits in the court record for Roger Stone in his case, and also for General Flynn in his case, because it was predicated on the Russian crap, the stuff that was concocted out of CIA in the White House, okay? This is where this originated. At any rate, we came up with very clear proof that a program called FAT, File Allocation Table Format, was used to download locally the files on the DNC emails, the 3 batches of files that WikiLeaks posted. In there, it has all the properties of the FAT file transferred to a storage device to be physically transported. That's clearly provable. All 35,813 emails that were posted have that property indicating FAT transfer was used. Now, the probability of error there is like 1 chance in 2 to the 35,813th power, which is like 1 chance in a 1 followed by 1,200 zeros, right? It's like infinitesimal. DNA matching is minuscule compared to this. So we clearly had the proof, and I put it in the court in an affidavit, ready to testify personally, and I was ready to go in, and the judges would not let my testimony in. Why? Because it would take away the entire case of the government. This whole business has been a fraud from the beginning. It was concocted. The traces we have is with Guccifer 2. We looked at his data also. We found, of course, the transfer speed was, much faster than was possible across the internet. We said that. A lot of people said, oh, well, no, we can get it there. So we said, okay, we're going to try it. So I got some hackers in Europe and a guy over here who put up a gigabit of data and said, here, take it across, and here's the file. And we tried it from various places, a couple of places in Netherlands, one in Belgrade, Serbia, and then down in Albania. We tried there, getting closer to the Russian border, right? Because if the Russians hacked it, we wanted to get close. And then we also tried it from London and between New Jersey and London, a data center transfer. And the fastest we could transfer the data was between the 2 data centers, one in New Jersey and one in London. And that was only 1/4 of what it was downloaded at the highest speed, according to the data that was posted by Guccifer 2. So that we know and could prove by that transfer was not a hack across the web. Now, the technical people, when I was talking to Pompeo when he was director of CIA, he had a couple of his technical people in there, and they asked me, well, how did you calculate that transfer speed? Well, it's pretty simple. Guccifer 2 put out a file after file after file that he said he hacked. Well, Yeah, and it would give you the file name, the number of characters in the file, and a timestamp at the end of the file. Then the next file name, number of characters, timestamp. So you get that repeated for 35,813 files. This was like, I don't know how many thousands of files, but it was like 16 gigabits of data. This was not the DNC data. This was other data. Okay. So when you looked at that, that was the fastest we could achieve with data center transfers was 1/4 of what it would take to have done it for the hack. So that proved it wasn't a hack. Now, further, we also found that were five emails that Gooser 2 posted on the 15th of June, the first time he came out and sent data out. 5 of those were also in the Podesta emails that posted by WikiLeaks. Now, the 5 that were posted by Gooser 2 had those fingerprints of Russians in it, right? The dirty Russians are in there doing this, okay? But the same 5 that were posted by WikiLeaks didn't have any Russian fingerprints at all. So that told us that Gooser 2 inserted those fingerprints. Now, that's to blame it on the Russians. Well, now then, under Vault 7 transfer, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Ray, it said in there that they had this program, Marble Framework, that would make it look like somebody else, that CIA could do the hack, and it would make someone else look like it somebody else did it. Who were those that could do that? Well, right up front was Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and Arab countries. Okay, so, and it also said in there, the Marble Framework was used once in 2016. Well, we think we found where it was used. And that points everything right back at CIA, that says CIA did this, created Gooser 2, fabricated this whole thing, is orchestrating the whole thing behind the curtain, and Obama approved it, by the way. He had to do that. I mean, it's coming out in some of the stuff that's being released from Strzok, some of the notes he took in meetings and so on. You know, all that's coming out. All these people were really involved, you know, and there's no protecting the guy at the top. You know, he's involved too.
And so you've actually seen with the Roger Stone indictments and those releases and the warrants, that came out in regards to it, with the information that was collected through Julian Assange's and WikiLeaks' communications with Gooser 2 and Roger Stone. We basically were shown that the government was not the government, that Julian was basically fucking with Gooser 2.
Yeah.
To where he would ask for larger data sets. WikiLeaks asked him to send the emails multiple times. And it was basically them saying, we understand that the information you're sending us isn't legitimate. And we're kind of egging them along throughout that process.
Yeah, but he also asked them if he could produce something that would be useful and above and beyond what they already had. So, you know, that tells you that right there. This guy's from CIA. He knew exactly what they had, and he didn't give them any of it. So.
Gooser 2 was speaking in perfect English, and it would be quite clumsy and irresponsible for so-called Russian intelligence to be speaking with WikiLeaks over Twitter. It makes no sense, and I think it screams that this was absolutely a CIA-led operation.
Yep.
Why did he do a lot of this work in U.S. time zones, Bill? What do you think that means?
Yeah, well, I didn't really focus on that too much because, you know, that could be easily manipulated. But the time zone stamps clearly showed it was done in the East Coast of the United States. I think we had one time stamp in the West Coast and one in Central Time. Mm-hmm. The rest were on the East Coast. Well, I think CIA is on the East Coast. Yeah, it is, in Virginia. That's right. Yep.
It's the DNC. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me say a word from the point of view of not illiterate, but technically challenged history majors. Now, Bill is being too modest. A lot of this stuff came true or came affirmed over the last year or two. The FAT format, for example, the file allocation format. But as early as December 12th, 2016, Bill authored, with help from Ed Loomis, the other former technical director from NSA, and others, including folks that cooperated with us from London, and the former head of IT for IBM US. Yep. We all cooperated and found out that, this couldn't have been a hack. And for people like me and maybe some of the audience here, The difference between a hack and a leak, or a kind of a download onto a thumb drive, is that a hack has to go over the internet. Okay, it has to go over the internet. Now, if Russians are hacking, or if you want to call it that fancy word, what's the fancy word they use from exfiltrated? Yeah, the information is exfiltrated from the DNC computers or server and put on the net, gotten over to Russia or wherever. Now, recall what I said before. Bill had a lot of difficulty persuading me that everything is collected. How I know it is because he showed me the slides that Ed Snowden brought out. Okay, so if everything was
I would point out, Ray, that I knew exactly what those slides meant because I invented half of that crap.
right,
Half of it I devised and built.
yeah. So people say, "How does Binney know this?" Well, that's the perfect squelch. I created it. But getting back to the hack versus the leak, very early, that is, before Trump ever became president, shortly after he was elected, December 2016, the Veteran Intelligence Professionals Society warned everybody, including Obama, that look, this couldn't be a Russian hack, couldn't be a hack from anybody. Now, that kind of evidence was considered non-persuasive by those who had sort of an axe to grind. They took solace in the famous Donald Rumsfeld theorem that he learned in Princeton. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Yeah, that's what brains think of.
Yeah. So
Donald Rumsfeld is like a Zen master of bullshit. I just wanted to get that out there. I did.
The absence of brains in there.
Yeah. According to this theorem, the absence of evidence that there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq doesn't mean that they're not there. Okay. And we got the guy who can deny that they're not there. In other words, we've got the guy who's supervising all imagery analysis and should be able to tell us where they are, and he can't. And who's that guy? That's a guy named James Clapper, okay, who is running the imagery analysis unit. And when one of his little soldiers came up, or airmen, and said, look, what Chalabi or these other Iraqi refugees, tell them about this chemical weapons facility here at these coordinates. It's a chicken farm, Now, what did Clapper do? He said, well, we're moving you to the library, and please don't ever mention that again, okay? Clapper sat on all the information indicating there were no weapons of mass destruction. And to top it all off, Clapper wrote a book. And what did he say in the book? He said, well, I bear a share of the blame because we were just so bending over, eager to please the Bush and Cheney government. We found things that weren't there. That's a direct quote. Clapper and his imagery analysis unit found things that weren't there. Okay. So I had a chance to ask Clapper about this. I said, this was at Carnegie Institute back in November of 18. Okay. I said, Mr. Clapper, now you admit that you were in charge of imagery analysis and that you found things that weren't there. Yeah, that's right. Well, fast forward now. Now you're working for a new guy named Obama, and he wants to find Russian hacking, and you're now head of all intelligence. Mr. Clapper, did you find things that weren't there? In other words, did you find things that, like Russian hacking, that weren't there? He's like, oh, no. I said, well, that's what we've found. And we've got two former NSA technical directors. And what do you have? He said, well, I've talked to NSA. And then he says this, and we're pretty sure that we have, or we had at the time, some proof. I mean, well, the guy should be in jail. He lied under oath about NSA eavesdropping. And, here he is, a big personality there at Carnegie, pushing his book in which he admits to the cardinal sin of intelligence analysis, and that is finding things that weren't there. This is the kind of people we're dealing with, and they have the goods on Clapper and on Brennan and on James Comey. And the only question I have is whether they have the guts. That is, whether Bill Barr, he talked a good game. If he has the guts to let Durham do his job. Durham is the U.S. attorney out there in Connecticut, and there's another U.S. attorney at work on the unmasking. Will they be allowed to do their job? And more important, will they be able to issue their findings before the election? Because if, as most people expect, Trump doesn't win, that's the end of all these investigations. Who wins? The deep state. And what president is going to be confronted with the deep state whenever he comes in November? Everyone. That's big.
I should add another thing here about Clapper.
By all means.
I had him under contract, a small contract, 3-day contract at NSA. While I was there, I had him come in to do some, give us some advice on how to do some automation involving the Air Force. And so, because he was an ex-Air Force 3-star general, he ought to be able to do that, right? So we brought him in, and we were talking about Air Force crap. Here's how we want to automate this and that, and then all this. Problem is, for my 3-day contract, it took me 2.5 days to get him to understand what I wanted to do. And I was talking about doing things for the Air Force, standard Air Force, bombing, damage assessment, that kind of thing, all those kind of terms the Air Force used. But it took him 2.5 days of the 3-day contract to figure out that I really wanted to make change. And at the end of it, he said to me, "Oh, you want to make real change?" I said, "A man is a brick mind." Really, Jen.
Does Clapper come from a legacy Air Force family, or is that why he got the 3 stars?
I don't know. I don't know that. I don't know, but he was Air Force, so that's all I know.
His father did work for NSA.
Yeah.
He's admitted that. And,
Right.
He's one other thing he learned from the Air Force, it must have been from Curtis LeMay, because he is of the Curtis LeMay magna cum laude version of what the Russians are all about, like bomb them back to smithereens. And this came out in a public interview, one of those Sunday interviews. And he said, you have to know the historical perspective about Russians. And this is a quote. The Russians are almost genetically driven to be, blah, 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 to be suspicious, to co-opt, to lie and cheat, and say almost genetically driven. Now, if I were Chuck Todd or whoever it was interviewing, I would say, well, are you saying that this kind of a racial thing? Is it just the Russians, or is it all Slavs? Or wow, what a revelation! Now, that's the guy that lied before the Senate Intelligence Committee, admitted he lied 2 months later when Ed Snowden came out with the truth, and sent a letter to the Senate committee saying, "Well, what I said was fundamentally wrong. Sorry about that." Now, he was allowed to stay in place as National Intelligence Director, for just 3.5 more years under Obama. And then just before Obama left, he commissioned this study to find out what we know about the Russian hacking. And who was the guy to do that? Oh, of course, Jim Clapper knows about the Russians, and they're genetically inclined to be deceitful and so forth. And who picked the people? Well, I'm sure he asked John Brennan to help him, but this was not an intelligence community assessment.
No.
The only part of that title that's correct is assessment. And Bill will tell you what an assessment is.
No, it's not assessment. It was a creation.
Yeah.
not an assessment.
Yeah, that's when you don't have.
Assessment being that we needed to figure out how we need to create this spin so we can throw it out there and bamboozle everybody. But I would like to say one more thing about Clapper lying.
Yeah.
Look at what they were trying to do, what they're doing with Roger Stone, sending him off to jail for 9 years, and said they tried to do the same thing with General Flynn for doing much less than Clapper did.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone what Hillary Clinton did. For God's sake, she compromised, I think, 40 different special access programs, and some really sensitive stuff out of NSA. Yeah, I mean, I could just read that and know that. It's crazy. These people.
Bill, say a little bit about special access programs, how much they cost, and how sensitive they are.
Well, we don't know what the price tag is because they're all behind the black budget, almost all of them, anyway. But some of them are really, really expensive. So, billions. And I think, for example, the one that's I think, hopefully being investigated now, which I hope it is, was called the Hammer, set up by Clapper and Brennan, according to the whistleblower. It was set up to spy on the Trump campaign and other major figures in the government in the United States, so that they could know what all these people were thinking, what they were planning, and all of that. So, and that goes into the entire Trump campaign, and I guess it fed into the indictments and so on. And so, that, and the problem with the indictments is, you don't understand what the rules were of the intelligence community. When you had one person in an organization that you were allowed to put a warrant on them, a U.S. person, then you could extend that by terms of the definition of the two-hop principle to everybody, not just in that organization, but into the whole country. In other words, Obama said he's going to limit NSA to 2 hops. That is, I call Ray, Ray calls somebody else. That's 2 hops. So, but the point is, if I call on the first hop Google, the next hop is Google out. That's 1.5 billion people every day. So eventually, you have virtually everybody on the planet. So it's just a matter of how many days it takes to get there. So, but that means that, and NSA was really happy with this, and I knew exactly why, and I tried to get him to put in Obama. I didn't realize the corruption involved here, but I tried to get him to put in the limitation that you can't take the second hop through an organization or a government, like a government or a company,
Google,
something that would get you to lots of people who weren't even relevant. You'd have to stick to people, individual to individual. So, but he didn't do that. So that meant that getting that one warrant on one person involved in the Trump campaign allowed him to do the entire group and the entire Republican.
There you are. You cut off there for the last second, Bill, but I think we got the gist of that. And to kind of jump tracks here a little bit, but not completely. Something that we've been wondering here as Action for Assange for a while. I can't think of 2 better people that would be able to help answer this. What do you think the DC leaks was? The organization that like, we're trying to figure out if it was the same type of government op as Guccifer 2.0, and if so, like, what can you point to help drive that answer home?
Well, the only thing I know is about DC leaks is that we have it through some other sources around, coming through the intelligence circles, if you will, from people who are working now to people who are retired, from retired to retired, and so on. That gets circulated. That both DC leaks and Guccifer 2 were creations of CIA. And the reason I mentioned that Hammer program is because Clapper and Brennan set up a separate group inside CIA to manage that program, separate from the rest of the government. The reason they did that was because that allowed them to spy on anybody. Nobody in the rest of the government would be able to see who it was doing it, and be able to monitor and do any kind of accountability on it. Whereas if they went to the NSA data, if they went in and asked for masking, that's why looking at the unmasking is going to give them a lot of clues as to who was involved in it. And that's documented in NSA when you do that. Every time you ask for an unmasking, it's documented. And also, if you interrogate the NSA database, that's also documented in the network log. You came in, your IP is there, your query is there, your return is there, everything is there in the log. So all of that going into NSA would be known by other parts of the government, and they did not want that to happen. So they created their own separate little cabal of people in a little corner of CIA that's managed this program, spying on selected people, mostly Trump campaign people and others, to try to make sure they knew what they were planning and what they were intending, and the knowledge that they had and so on, so they could try to counter it in the election. So that was that, and this just fit right into that group there. DC Leaks and Goose are two coming out of that group fits perfectly.
Yeah, Bill, would it be possible and appropriate to label this program unmasking on steroids?
Yes, I think they really did 12,000 unmaskings or something like that. That's great.
Yeah. The other thing that I'd sort of add here is, and this may again be helpful to people who don't know the technical end of things very much, like I was. When the WikiLeaks revealed what Bill has referred to as Vault 7, it was pretty sexy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, in March of 2017, it was so sexy that the New York Times, the Washington Post, on the 7th of March, there was this report that some of these offensive cyber tools could take charge of your car, take control of your car, make it go 110 miles an hour, and crash you. You know? Another one with a TV, you think you turned it off, but it's very much on, and it's monitoring everything you're doing in your bedroom or wherever. Okay. Then on the 31st of March, a new revelation came out, Marble Framework, as Bill mentioned before. And what was this described at in the CIA document? It was described as a obfuscation scheme.
Yep.
That's about as fancy a word as you get in the CIA. Obfuscation. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, it means, and it was spelled out in the documents. These are documents, okay? These are WikiLeaks replay of documents gotten from somebody in the CIA or a contractor. Anyhow, what it says is that, you know, what you can do is obfuscate by putting in fingerprints or footprints or little morsels like Hansel and Gretel, drop these things, and then you can misattribute it to somebody else. Whoa! As Bill said, it became known that that was used in 2016. Now, as soon as that came out, I think I mentioned it was the 31st of March, I get a call, 7 o'clock in the morning, just barely awake. Oh, Ray, this is RT. Can you come right in? I said, come on, this is not RT. Call back. Well, ring it. Yeah, hello, RT. No, this is no joke, Ray. We need you to come in right away. I said, you're not even open yet. No, come on in. We're going to use the Eurovision studio. We have a remarkable revelation coming from WikiLeaks. Take a look at your computer. They say, so I looked at the computer. I said, okay, I can come in, but, it's rush hour. That's all right. Can you be here at 9? Yeah, I can. So here I am driving down the carpool lane all alone on I-66 into Washington. And I said, what am I going to say about this? So I asked Bill, are you awake? Yeah, sure, I'm awake. Well, tell me about Vault 7. Well, he says, Ray, what's important to know is that it has 7 million lines of, no, how many? 100, yeah, 700. Yeah, got it. See? 700 million lines of code. And so I say, well, that sounds like a lot, Bill. Oh, great. Look, maybe, can you still do mathematics? Yeah, I can. Multiplication, yeah. Okay, each line of code costs $25. So multiply that by 700 million. Okay, now that's for the whole Vault 7. That's just not just for Marble Framework, but that's the kind of operation that Brennan was running in a new directorate that he established to do precisely that, offensive cyber. Bill says to me, Ray, I know about this. We started cooperating. We in NSA started cooperating with CIA about 12 years ago on this kind of stuff, and this is the natural outcome. So that gives you an idea of the magnitude of the expenditure and how much was put into this thing. And now all of a sudden, it's blown by some leaker. And who's the villain? WikiLeaks, because that person knew or thought that they could do this in a secure way. So that's one of the reasons they hate Julian Assange. And it's worth noting that was the 31st of March, 2017, as I mentioned. 8 days later, at a conference, one of these think tanks in Washington, Mike Pompeo got up. Then he was the head of the CIA, where, contrary to West Point traditions, he could lie, cheat, and steal up the kazoo. Lie, cheat, and steal was great fun. It was an American tradition, okay? He gets up and he says, Julian Assange is a demon. I even as a boy, I didn't believe in demons, but apparently Assange and Pence and those guys do. Okay, and then he said, Assange is running a non-state hostile intelligence service, and we're going to get him. Okay. Now, right after that, Julian's contact with the rest of the world was hindered. Later, it was shut off. And just a year or two later, he's unceremoniously dragged out of the embassy there, the Ecuadorian embassy in Britain. Some of you remember how he looked. I since learned that they were depriving him of a razor, so he couldn't shave. And that's why he looked so disheveled. And that's, for those of you who don't know, that's why I look so disheveled. I just try to figure out some way to identify, to express solidarity to Julian. And so this is, since March 11th of last year, I do hope for lots of reasons that Assange gets free real quick.
I have a quick follow-up to this line of discussion here real quick. Do you guys think that the Podesta emails and the DNC leaks came from the same source, or were they two different sources?
No, the Podesta emails were truly hacked. There's no FAT file format properties there at all. So it definitely looked like a hack. But the DNC emails were, in fact, all showed that FAT file properties, and that meant it wasn't hacked. So it was like a local download off the network for the DNC. It's like you take a thumb drive and plug it into your computer and download a file to it. You could do that at very high speeds if you want. That's why the high speeds of the Gooster 2 data could be accommodated with a thumb drive. But it can't go across the web. And it gets back to the way I first tipped to this, the way they were talking about the Russians did this hack, back in August of 2016. That's when I first started saying, well, the way they talk about things tells you a little bit about the evidence of what they've got behind it. And it was all kind of high confidence and inferencing and stuff like that. That means they have absolutely no evidence behind it at all. Now, it's just like the New York Times, and this is clear for me. I mean, I know how these guys write and, how they think and, the kinds of crap they put out. But the New York Times just published this latest one about, again, having high confidence that the Russians are paying the Taliban to kill for every American they kill. Well, again, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, well, where's the evidence? There isn't anything. It's more just like the kinds of statements they were making back in the August of 2016 about the Russians. Same thing. It's the same thing again. So unless they come up with the evidence and clearly state it, I mean, Kennedy opened it up with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Reagan did it with the KAL shoot down. These guys can do it with this if they're going to start pointing fingers at Russia for being really bad guys and justifying any kind of conflict with them at all. This is crazy if they don't, because these people keep lying to us. You can't trust these people. I mean, what they did with this Russiagate thing is really more serious than anybody's thinking. Stop to think about it. If you're now the president, how can you trust what your intelligence agencies are telling you when right off the bat that they've been lying to you in the past? I mean, how can you trust them? I mean,
and then on top of that, the legal precedent that not prosecuting anyone sets, because then it means that President Donald Trump can use that same style, power, and authority to target his political opponents free of
That's
any
right.
type of judicial action. And that's the scarier thing to me, because I would love to see this like first act of government accountability in my 29-year lifetime. But the scarier thing is if they don't act on it, because then it allows every presidential administration to use that power. And it'll eventually seep down, if it hasn't already, to governor races and to county positions. And if you're well enough connected, you can get the intelligence on whoever you want.
And through the judicial courts, through the courts and all. I mean, I blame this all on Jerry Ford. Jerry Ford pardoned Richard Nixon when he was going to be indicted, when he should have let him go, and and let the indictment happen, let him be charged because of the crimes he committed. That's what should have happened. But by pardoning him, what it did was it sent a message to every president: hey, you have a get out of jail free card for anything you do. It's the next president. Why? Because he wants to be able to do what he thinks is right, no matter what that is, and expect to be pardoned by the next president following him. So I blame it all on Jerry Ford for what he did. He did the wrong thing there.
Well, Bill, you forget now that if the president does it, it's legal.
Yeah, right.
Well, and ever since Nixon got pardoned, there's been an expansion of the power of the president, the unitary executive. What Reagan was able to get away with, well, I guess what George H.W. Bush was able to get away with while he was president for Reagan's first 2 terms, and then going forward, there is just, I mean, an endless stream of crimes against humanity, war crimes, and massive violations of rule of law, culminating in Donald Trump seeking to destroy investigative journalism on the chance that someone might give something to WikiLeaks and they would publish it. Taylor's been waiting very patiently with a question here, so I think we're going to let her ask that.
Well, thanks, Steve. So we've known for some time now that Assange and his visitors were being spied on while he was in London's Ecuadorian embassy. And recently, Max Blumenthal published an article where we learned just a little bit more of what the nature of the relationship was between UC Global, this Spanish security firm, and the U.S. intelligence. Now, we know that the CIA used Sheldon Adelson's Las Vegas Sands Corporation to contract this company, UC Global, and they worked very closely with the co-founder of this security firm, which was David Morales. And I just wanted to know how often it is that the CIA or the intelligence community in general is using private companies to do their dirty work.
They do that all the time. In fact, half the people working inside CIA are contractors from companies.
And the same with NSA.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So they, often or always they do it. And of course, these companies are not sworn to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, like Bill and I are, and we take that seriously. They're in it for the money, pure and simple.
Right. David Morales is being held accountable for this. He is on trial right now in Spain. However, of course, he was really the person who was being sort of a puppet in all of this. The real perpetrators of this are the intelligence community, yet we're not seeing anybody who was a part of this operation be held accountable, nor Sheldon Adelson or any of the people who were working on his behalf.
Well, that's true. If you look at that is the U.S. administration's attitude toward the international, the ICC, International Criminal Court, they dismiss all this. We're above the law and we don't have to worry about it. I'd like to hone down on who's responsible. We're talking about presidents, Ford, and so forth. But, presidents are afraid. And I use that term advisedly. Here's Obama. Okay. He's a very principled person, right? He says in May and June of 2008 that he's against holding the giant telecoms innocent or, holding them not accountable for violating the Constitution, namely the Fourth Amendment, which Bill can, cite chapter and verse of those violations. They were already doing it. And that was before 9/11. All right. Okay. So Obama says, no, people want to hold these people not accountable, harmless or innocent. We can't do that. We gotta prosecute them to the full extent of the law. That's May 2008. Huh. Right before the 4th of July, and I wrote about this at the time, all of a sudden he changes his mind. And he says, well, no, I think it's too important. We should hold them harmless. We should hold these giant telecom companies harmless. And I'm gonna vote to hold them harmless. Now, what happened between May and July of 2008? Well, one thing that happened is John Brennan joined his campaign. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but I can perceive that John Brennan whispered in his ear, look, Senator Obama, this is bigger than you. Let me tell you the realities of Washington. We don't like the term deep state, but there is one, and we can't tolerate this kind of stuff. And so if you want to have a prayer of becoming president, you gotta be smarter than this. You can't adopt these altruistic things about, violating the Fourth Amendment. I mean, hello, we do that all the time. So he changed his mind. Now, how did Obama act during the rest of his presidency? 8 years. Well, he did everything Brennan told him to do, whether it was killing people because they associated with somebody who had lunch with some known terrorist in a Lebanese cafe, or whatever it was. He met with them once a week and did this little list. I could just see him, Well, John, number 4 here, Ahmed. I saw him. You had him on last week's list, right? But didn't you tell me he has four kids and a wife? Yeah, same guy. Well, where's yours now? Because I had another lunch with Ahmed. Well, I don't know. John, why don't you put him at the bottom of the list again, and we'll talk about him next week. I don't feel quite right about zapping him. Do the other 10. Now I have to go have lunch with Michelle. That's going on in the White House? Yeah, that went on in the White House. And the proof was really in the pudding. When torture came up front and center, and to its great credit, the Senate Intelligence Committee decided to commission a study of CIA torture techniques and what it revealed. 4 years they did it. They labored hard, and Dianne Feinstein, again, to her credit, supervised these young people. And they got the goods on CIA partly because somebody inadvertently allowed them to get the real poop, namely the Podesta stuff, which was prepared to him internally, and they got it. Okay, so they had the goods on CIA. What did Obama do? He was really surprised that John Brennan would hack into computers that he promised and swore on a stack of Bibles that he would never do, computers belonging to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Oh, did he do that? Well, he said no, but then he said yes. Okay. Now,
After he got caught.
yeah, after he got caught. And then, of course, when push came to shove, and this 4-year study had been vetted with Obama's chief of staff at every meeting to look at the sentences that you couldn't let appear in the executive summary of this thing, okay? After it became clear that it had been vetted and was ready to be produced, now that was just a couple of months before the election where the Senate might turn, and it did. So Dianne Feinstein is not going to be chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee after January, but really after November of that year. So what did Obama do? Well, he said, "Well, we can't let this stuff out. Let's get John Kerry to weigh in because these are all senators and they know him." So Kerry comes in. He said, "No, if you let this thing on torture be published, we'll destroy our international relations. You can't do that." Okay. Well, these young Turks, these young investigators under Dianne Feinstein said, "Look, this is a lot of bull here. We can do this. It's been vetted, and we got to do it." And so Dianne says, and then what happens? The senator from Udall was his name. The senator from Colorado loses. Okay, he loses the election in November. He's got nothing He's got no reason to be reticent, and he was one of the foremost guys to say, we need to tell the truth on this. So Udall goes to Feinstein and says, you tell the president that if he keeps sitting on this thing, I'm going to read it from the Senate floor. I'm going to read the whole executive summary. And so Diane goes to Obama and says, look, you're free to produce this thing. It's been vetted and everything, or Udall's going to read it from the Senate floor. And only then does Obama allow the thing to be issued. It's issued in December. And what does it say? It says that Brennan and his folks were lying through their teeth about not torturing. And then when the evidence is clear they were torturing, that they got good information from that torture. They deceived everybody in Congress, everybody in the press. They got no good information. And it really, the whole thing was just not only reprehensible, but a travesty in terms of intelligence collection. That's what it revealed. So what did Obama try to do? All through that process, and it took a whole year, okay? He had his chief of staff sit down on these sessions, and then he tried his best to prevent it from being published. Now, we only have a redacted executive summary of that torture report. It's quite enough. It's bad enough. But can you imagine what's beneath those redactions? And can you imagine what the several hundred pages of this investigation say? Now, what happened when the Senate changed terms? Oh, this fellow named, what's his name? The guy from North Carolina, William Burr comes in, right? Bill's had some experience with Burr. And what's the first thing Burr says? I recall all copies of the torture memo. They belong to me. It's a Senate product. Everyone who has a copy, bring it back to me. Okay. Well, guess who was the first one? An hour later at Richard Burr's door. The head of the CIA. Here are copies. Here you go. Well, there's some word that there's a copy in Obama's library. I don't vouch for how long that's going to stay in Obama's library. In any case, Obama and everyone knew what was going to happen. The only thing is that principled people, in this case, those investigators of the Senate Intelligence Committee and Dianne Feinstein and Senator Udall were going to do the right thing. And that's the only time that Obama was forced not to drive home what Brennan wanted. And that's a big deal, because when people try to explain Obama's behavior, and more recently, of course, how much did Obama know about this soft coup that was percolating in 2016, 2017? Well, we know that Peter Strzok's mistress, Lisa Page, wrote him an email one time. We have the email. It says it was early September 2016, I think the 5th. And it says, my God, guess what? I'm doing talking points for, her boss was McCabe. I'm doing talking points because Obama, she didn't say Obama, POTUS, President of the United States, because POTUS wants to know everything we're doing. POTUS wants to know everything we're doing. Well, you don't have to be a super analyst to infer that Obama was being briefed not only by the likes of Strzok and Page, but McCabe and the FBI. And we now, of course, know that he's being briefed on what they were trying to do to Flynn, General Flynn, on the 5th of January is when he was briefed on all that. And, he said a couple of things, which we now have in Strzok's notes. So all I'm saying here is that the stakes are very, very high. Okay? Obama can come in and say, well, let's look back. Let's look forward, not backward. Let's not hold anybody accountable for talking. Okay. Now, if that is allowed to stay, and it will be, if this investigation doesn't come to some pretty logical conclusions before the election, then the next president who comes in is going to face exactly the same situation when he's briefed by the likes of Jim Comey. He'll be told now, Mr. President, just so you know, we have this dossier We don't know if some of the charges are confirmed or not, but they're very scarlet and they're about you. And just so you know, Mr. President, just so you know. So that's what's at stake. There is a deep state. Uh, Last thing I'll say is that we have a pretty authoritative word on that from a fellow named John McLaughlin, who was acting CIA director for a long time, and before that, deputy director. He said last October, he says, thank God for the deep state. His words, thank God for the deep state, because, in paraphrasing now, because we know what the limits are and can prevent presidents and others from doing some very foolish things. We know what's best, and we are the deep state. Thank God for the deep state.
That phrase, that thank God for the deep state. Am I muted? No, I'm not. Great. That was an op-ed in the Washington Post by Charles Blow too, in 2017. That exact phrase.
Well, I was going to say, and Ray can confirm this. Casey, when he was director of CIA back in about 1982, somewhere in there, came out and said that they'd been infiltrating the media for decades, and that you'll know that when they've succeeded, when everything that they're saying is false. And so you're talking about the media. The media is a part of the deep state.
Yeah, I wanted to. I don't know how much time you guys have tonight, but I did want to touch on that a little bit. And this does directly correlate with the fine piece of writing that Ray has in Consortium News right now. And it's we're kind of doing two jobs at once here as Action for Assange. We're organizing on a national and local level, trying to get people out into the streets and spread awareness about the persecution and torture of Julian Assange. But we're also we're also journalists. We're also part of this independent media that vacillates between truly independent and a supplementary arm of cable news, depending on who you're watching. And there's so much history of intelligence agency, not even interference, but direction that has taken place in the national United States media, that we have flavors of state television, like Baskin Robbins for state television. You've got the neocon talking points on Fox News. You've got neoliberal talking points on CNN, MSNBC, and ever since that 2012 NDAA, where they did away with provisions that made it difficult, if not outright illegal, to present government propaganda on network and cable news, it has just exploded. And the effects of that, like when you've got someone that is ostensibly an independent journalist, but because of the way they do their show, legacy or established media provides the baseline content that they use for their show, they're inadvertently regurgitating intelligence community talking points while they frame their show.
That's right. It's an old sophistic technique. Goes back to the ancient Greece. That's where you get everybody to start saying the same thing. You get a bunch of people to say the same thing from all different directions. And eventually you repeat it over and over again. That's why Hitler said, if you're going to tell a lie, tell a big one and tell it up until it's believed. That's the sophistic technique of repetition. This is as old as the hills. Okay.
Yeah.
And it still works with people.
When you come down to Bill Casey, your quote was quite apt here, Bill. What he said, it was the first cabinet meeting of the new administration, Ronald Reagan's administration, early February 1981, right? Okay. Now, how do we know this? Barbara Honegger was there, okay? She's a good friend. And she's written it up. She wrote it up at the time, and it was published. Okay. And what did Casey actually say? He said, "We'll know that our propaganda effort is successful when everything the Americans believe is false." Whoa. Well, now everything the Americans believe about Russiagate, well, it's false.
Yeah.
Everything the Americans believe about what the New York Times is pushing now about Putin paying out payments to get American soldiers killed. Well, I can't say 100% it's false, but I like to see some evidence. I'd like to see more than an assessment here. And I'd like to see, what Bill described as real evidence. Yeah, Bill.
I was going to say, Ray, this is real simple. If those money transfers are going to the Taliban for either wounding or killing so many Americans, all right, we know the number that get killed or wounded every so often, right? We know a period of time. So what's the difference between when they sent the money the last time and when they sent the next batch of money? How many people did they wound or kill? And what's the factor here? You should be able to divide that into this money they transferred and figure out the price they're paying per casualty, right?
Yeah.
I didn't hear any of that in the New York Times.
No.
I didn't hear anything about repeated transfers of money either. All I heard was, they had some money going to this account over there, and it must be going for that. Well, that's what they wish it was going for. That's what they want you to believe it's going for, but they haven't proven anything.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen Bill's pass.
To think that the Taliban needs encouragement.
Yeah.
I mean, people, the Taliban made a statement,
Yeah.
and what they said, obviously they would deny it, but what they said was, look, we're expert at targeted killings, and we do this with our own resources. Thank you very much. we don't need payments from the CIA to do this, and of course that's the case. The story here is incomplete without noting that no Americans have been killed since February. And that's because there's a deal now where the Taliban said, okay, we won't shoot at you Americans anymore if you just please get out of town, okay? And that's been the case. So, what they're digging up here is a huge diversion of attention from things that are coming down the pike. The big thing that's coming down the pike is the publication of secret testimony. Now, the testimony goes back to December 5th, 2017. So what's that? About 2.5 years ago, huh? But it wasn't published until the 7th of May this year. Now, I've done the math on this one, Bill, so I'm accurate.
Okay.
That's 7 weeks, okay? Now, we knew that 7 weeks ago. We published on it right away. The head of CrowdStrike, the firm that was hired and paid for by the DNC, had to admit under oath before the Intelligence Committee that there was no concrete evidence that the DNC emails were, what's the word, Bill? Exfiltrated. Fancy word for hacked. No concrete evidence. This guy, Sean Henry, says, well, yeah, sometimes we can get chapter and verse. Sometimes we can trace the whole thing, and that's really good. But this time we couldn't do that. And so we relied on, methods that are consistent with what the Russians have done in the past. Well, give me a break, give me a break, okay? So here's the head of CrowdStrike that James Comey, in his wisdom of the FBI, let do the forensics to the degree they did any forensics. And here he's saying there's no evidence that anyone exfiltrated from the DNC. Russia? Anybody? Okay, so what does that mean? Hello? It means that what we were saying back in December of 2016, veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, Bill and others involved, that it wasn't a hack, okay? It was a leak. Now, the best way to scream is you copy the document onto a thumb drive, and one of those copies turned out to be exactly at the same speed as a thumb drive can accommodate, but 4 times the speed that the internet can accommodate. And let me just say one more word. From a layman's point of view or a non-technical person, it helped me when Bill explained the principle of physics involved here. In other words, we're not assessing this, we're not assessing that. We're doing physics, okay? Physics doesn't change, okay? So what's the principle? Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but I think it's fluid dynamics, right?
Yep.
So you got a pipe, right? Here's a pipe. Now the internet is a pipe, okay? And we knew exactly what the tolerance was, what it could accommodate in terms of flow through in the amount of time as of July, in this case, 2016. And we knew that it was only 1/4 the speed or the volume that a internet pipe could accommodate, but it was exactly the speed that corresponds to a thumb drive. So it wasn't like assessment. It wasn't like, oh, we think this or we think no. This was fluid dynamics. You know, if you have a storm sewer, it's the same thing. You know, when you have a flood. So all I'm saying here is that people pretend that this is too hard to understand. A history major like me can understand it. All I have to do is talk to Bill and read what's going on. I can understand fluid dynamics, okay? So there's a lot of pretense here. There's a lot of people saying, oh, it's just too, and there's a lot of people who will say, oh, this is a conspiracy theory. Now, back in December of 2017, when Sean Hendry, the head of CrowdStrike, testified before the Intelligence Committee. It was the House Intelligence Committee. Who was in charge of that committee? A fellow named Conaway from Texas. Why? Because Nunes had been sort of knocked off because he had told the truth too much. You can't tell the truth too much and stay head of the Intelligence Committee, okay? So Conaway was running things, okay? And he was letting Adam Schiff run off at the mouth. And then Conaway says, oh, and we have this report. Oh, sorry, I don't have the right one with me, but it's from former intelligence officers who say, and they argue persuasively to a person like me, that it wasn't hacked at all. It's a leak, but this is a conspiracy theory, right? And Sean Hendry from CrowdStrike, oh, yeah, that's a conspiracy theory. How do you know that? Well, I checked with my people. They say it was a conspiracy theory. Okay, so it's a conspiracy. Now, and Conaway says, this is really hard to understand. So, CrowdStrike, what do you think? Now, you know, this is going to be crazy. Yeah, James Risen, the notable New York Times guy who wrote some good stuff back when, he comes out a year and a half ago on a TV program. And he says, after he wrote this thing about is Trump committing treason? That was his first big effort for this Intercept outfit. Is Trump committing treason? Then he's invited on this TV show. And they ask about Bill Binney. He says, oh, yeah, Bill Binney, he's a nice guy, but he's a conspiracy theorist. He's just a conspiracy theorist. Did you get it? It's a conspiracy theory. And these guys, it was on the Rising, the Hill thing. Said, oh, wow, conspiracy. So, you know, last thing I'll say on this one is that conspiracy theory is really, really, really convenient. Who invented it? Alan Dulles. Who was Alan Dulles? He was the guy that ran the Bay of Pigs operation, was deceiving John Kennedy, and John Kennedy got rid of him and said that he was going to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces. Now, Kennedy was killed in November of 1963. Very suspicious circumstances. A lot of people thought maybe the CIA had a hand in it. Well, the Warren Commission is appointed. And who's the guy running the Warren Commission? Not Warren, a guy named Alan Dulles running the whole Warren Commission. Now, there you go. Now, when people objected, and this is the point of the story, people said, well, how can you have Alan Dulles running the Warren Commission when a lot of people think that he had something to do with the assassination? What was Dulles's reply? Conspiracy theory. That's a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy theory, and that's stuck. And to this day, people are not quite sure what happened, but I am. I'm persuaded that the CIA and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and a few other people had a hand in the killing of John Kennedy, and that was the deep state in spades, on steroids, if you will. And what we're seeing now is a direct descendant of that. And if it's not stopped in the next 4 months, it's going to go on forever.
And since I it was called by the mainstream media, all of them, Rachel Maddow and CNN and all of them, conspiracy theorist, I should be allowed to add something here. Number one, I pointed out on RT that these people have all they're doing is showing the shallow argument that they've got. They have no fundamental evidence, so the only thing they could do is throw labels around at people. And when I was on Tucker Carlson's show, I made the comment. That's why I haven't been back since then. It came out to be, that I was a conspiracy theorist. I said, well, all these people are arguing from nothing. They're just throwing labels at me, and I refuse to join the herd of mentally impaired people. So all of them are simply mentally impaired. They're actually doing it on purpose to keep their jobs, right? That's the whole thing. They're not thinking at all. They can't think, I guess, or they don't want to. So however you want to look at it, they're mentally impaired.
I'm pretty sure it was Upton Sinclair that said it's hard for a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it.
Yeah.
And Rachel Maddow got what, 32 million a year of reasons to not understand exactly what it was that happened with the DNC emails and everything that has gone on subsequently. And I mean, she's doing Sean Hannity's show from the left.
Yeah.
Or from the center, I guess, because there's nothing remotely left about someone with that much money and that much power. Ray, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject here. I don't think Rachel Maddow is mentally impaired.
They don't hand those Rhodes scholarships out to anyone?
Well, you don't have to be mentally impaired to get a Rhodes Scholarship, but it does help, okay?
There you go.
Yeah, well, look, you get Bill Clinton, you got all kinds of people with the Rhodes Scholarships. Now, what I'm saying here is that this is really more sinister than what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
If you watch, and I recommend it highly, I never watch Rachel Maddow, but I did Friday night. Friday was the day that the New York Times came out saying Putin is paying people to kill U.S. troops, right? Well, she was, I don't know, I have nothing to compare with it, but she was deranged. She was out of her gourd. I mean, it was 7 minutes of, well, see it for yourself, Rachel Maddow on last Friday night. Now, what happens? Well, people are not discerning enough to know whom to believe. This is big. I come out of New York. I grew up there in the Bronx, and I went to university there. And the people, when I go back there, they look at me like I have two heads. What do you mean? Rachel is our favorite. We always watch Rachel. And the New York Times. Are you saying that the New York Times is lying? And I'm saying, yeah, actually, I'm saying that. Well, the New York Times is fudging the truth. Well, yeah. Don't you remember me telling you way back when Bush was running for his second term, that the Times was reluctant to report the truth? Oh, you remember that. And this is worth repeating. James Risen had the goods on Bush and Cheney. He already knew about the dragnet eavesdropping. He already knew, as Bill knew, that they were snooping on Americans. Okay, what did he do? Well, he told his betters at the New York Times, he said, "Wow, this is dynamite. I'm going to put this story." And he said, "Well, wait a second. The election's coming up. It's 2004. Oh, the election. Well, yeah, but this is the summer. I mean, this is like July. Oh, no, this election's coming up." And so rather than publish the fact that our Fourth Amendment rights are being grossly violated, by this scooping up of all intelligence, what does Risen do? He says, well, I want to publish this, but they're not going to let me. So I know what I'll do. I'll save it for a book. Save it for a book. Yeah, okay. Now, what happens? It's squelch. No reporting is done on this. Bush wins. And then in December the following year, 2005, Risen goes to his superiors and says, I got this great book. And I put a chapter in on this, surveillance, this turnkey tyranny, which later Snowden called it. And so it's going to be a little embarrassing if I put that in my book and it's in galley, it's ready to go, and you don't report it in the time. So I'm happy to write you write you an article so that you don't look too bad. I've had it since, remember, 2 summers ago. So the Times said, oh my God, oh yeah. So they go down to the Oval Office and they talk to Bush, requesting permission. And Bush says, no, you can't do this. Secrets, national security, national. He said, well, Mr. President, we held off for 16 months now. It's embarrassing enough that we just have to. I mean, the book doesn't, we have to. No, I don't agree. So Sulzberger leaves with his retinue, and they do publish. I think it was the 16th of December. They finally get it on record. Now, what does it say? That says that the New York Times is going to do whatever the government tells them to do. All the government has to do is say national security, national security, national security. And I had a chance to ask Jill Abramson, who is the executive director of the New York Times, just a small group of maybe 2,000 people in their auditorium about a year later. And she was bragging about the gutsy decision that the Times made in publishing that. But Jill, wait a second. You waited for 16 months. That's gutsy. Well. So that's how bad it is. And this latest flurry of information about Putin paying people to kill U.S. soldiers, well, I see that possibly, not sure, but my inference is that they know what's coming down the pike. They know what Bill Barr and John Durham have on these guys, and they know it's going to be very embarrassing for the New York Times to admit that they've been completely coddling these folks. And so what's the best defense? A good offense. So they got this thing going, and most people believe them. I've gotten all kinds of emails, all kinds of objections to what I've written. How can you not believe this? And so most people, so that's our job. The bottom line here is that's our job. Now, we're hindered. We don't have access to major media outlets, but you guys are doing a great job. And somehow or other, I'm hoping for something in the nature of a miracle where somebody with a conscience in the mainstream media says, well, wait a second, these guys have been right all along. Maybe we ought to give them a little bit of a hearing. And when that happens, and when these court cases come down the pike, there's a chance that the truth will prevail. My major concern is that the wheels of justice grind slow. And if they grind slower than November, they might as well forget about it.
So one of the things, because there's a lot of discussion tonight about the infiltration of intelligence community into the mainstream media. And one of the bills actually that got passed in 2016 that enables this to happen is called the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act of 2016. And the short of it, what this act did is it built the Center for Information Analysis and Response. And according to its own statement here, for its function, it's integrating interagency efforts to track and evaluate counterfactual narratives abroad that threaten national security interests of the United States and U.S. allies. And further down in here, it actually lays out the framework for how the United States government will make direct payments to media corporations for running stories that counter the disinformation that this agency identifies. And so I was just wondering what you guys thought about maybe this influence that's happened since 2016 and the upsurge of nefarious intelligence community members making more and more appearances on mainstream media outlets.
I would put it in the context of sort of just getting their arms around all these agencies that are doing the same thing. I mean,
Yeah,
used to be covert
nothing new here.
I mean, yeah, it's the covert action staff of CIA, and then became the National Democracy Group, and then now everybody, the Pentagon, of course, and the State Department, they all have this stuff going, and they need to sort of try to get some handle on it. And so I don't see any difference in what they're doing, except to try to coordinate a little better by setting up this superstructure. Bill, do you see that as any different?
No, I mean, in fact, I wanted to also point out that, Ray, that it wasn't just the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. They were violating the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments, because not only did they watch everybody and who they were associated with so they could use it with the IRS to slow roll people for getting 501c3 like the Tea Party, or they could use it against the Occupy group to take the guys out of the streets, or they could use it against religious organizations trying to get politically active and become 501c3s, things of that nature. They use the IRS to do that. That's what they were doing back there. And then there's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. They're actually copying all the content of everything people are saying and writing. It's not just the metadata, it's the content too. Then they're using that content to look for the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the FBI are using that. I got this from Mueller, Director Mueller of the FBI. I mean, he came on in an interview with Bart Gellman in 2011, March, just before he was scheduled to get out, be retired from the directorship of the FBI. You know, he said he'd been using the Stellar Wind program since 2001. Well, that's the domestic spying program, and that's what they were doing. And they'd use that to find common crime in the United States. Well, see, that's a violation of the Fifth Amendment, using what you're saying without having it captured under a warrant signed by a judge. That's inadmissible in a court of law. So then what they do is they have to violate the Sixth Amendment, due process and all, so that, in the court of law, the defendant is allowed to challenge the evidence used against him to arrest him. That's part of the due process of the court, criminal courts. So, but here, what the FBI and the DEA do is they do manufacture evidence, going around doing standard policing techniques and research, and get the data, and then they use that data in the court of law, saying this is the reason, this is the data we had to arrest the guy, and that's perjury. It's fabricated. It's framing somebody. It's perjury. It's obstruction of justice. It's subversion of the judicial process. It's so many more crimes. It's not funny. And I keep pointing this out, and I called it a planned programmed perjury policy run by the Department of Justice of the United States. And we've got the layout of the rules for executing this plan.
Yeah, Bill, there's a fancy word for that, and that's called parallel construction.
That's right.
I had a chance to ask Robert Mueller.
Yes, you did.
Right after he laid down his labors for the FBI. Again, it was a small group of about 300 people at Georgetown University, but I raised my hand. I was the first one to ask a question. I said, now, Mr. Mueller, do you have any legal qualms about collecting NSA-type information on Americans and then giving that to police or law enforcement and having then reconstruct a case where they can prosecute these people by finding usable information, usable in court? You call that parallel construction. I mean, do you have any legal qualms about this illegally acquired information being used? And he says, Mr. McGovern, after 9/11, we were given special authorities. Next question. Special authorities, I asked Colleen Rowley, one of our veteran intelligence professionals for Sanity, a former FBI counsel at the Minnesota office there. I said, Colleen, how can special authorities contradict the Constitution? She says, well, it's not the first time this happened. What happens is they do this stuff, and then it takes 5, 6, maybe 10 years to get through the courts. And finally they say, no, you can't do that. Meanwhile, they've had a field day. So that's how the system works, folks. And we have to be aware of this and do all we can to stop it and to applaud people like Edward Snowden, because he was quite right in talking about tyranny. And as things get hotter and more complicated in this country, they're going to use all this stuff against the likes of us if we point out the truth on matters that really get under their skin.
Well, I think it's the 2020 through 2022 National Counterintelligence Defense Strategy. It was a document that came out that specifically listed hacktivists, leaktivists, and public disclosure organizations alongside the names of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and terror groups around the world. So I was wondering if you guys thought anything about that and like the impact that that could have on local journalism, as well as the coverage of all of the protests that are going on, whether it's the people that stormed the Capitol in Michigan to reclaim their rights, the arms groups, or the Black Lives Matter groups. Do you think that they are at risk of being targeted by this national defense counterintelligence strategy?
I think they already are. I mean, they're already being. First of all their data is being scooped up. All they have to do is have somebody in the CIA or the FBI ask for their data. That's all it is. So it's already captured and stored for retroactive analysis. And so I think they're just like the Trump campaign and the political his entire campaign were all spied on, and him in particular, for years before he even announced being a candidate. So I think that this is really just they're basically saying we're going to do whatever we want to do, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah,
It's
Bill, I think
the extent of how arrogant their power. They think they have all this power, and this is how arrogant they've become.
And if you go back to Occupy and how that was squelched, there are things called fusion centers where the various intelligence agencies input what they have. And then they go to the local governor, the mayor, and they say, "Oh, these guys are bad apples. These guys are in touch with the Russians, or with the Chinese," and they're raided and they're destroyed in these camps, and some people are put in jail. So it's not new. Again, we have sort of codification in this document that you mentioned, Andrew. So it's really quite bad, and that's what we have to blow the whistle on. And again, we need to find some way of getting this stuff more prominently in the media. I know it's difficult. I know that only too well, but sometimes I think that the fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves. I mean, we're pretty intelligent people, I think. Can't we figure that out? It's the most important thing for us to figure out. How do we get into the minds and into the hearts of people who really need to know the real story, rather than think they're getting the real story from the New York Times?
Well, I think you have to depend on having people in the mainstream media who want to really know what the truth is. They don't really want to know. They want to, like we've been talking about, keep their paycheck going and just keep going on and continuing. That's all. Besides, once you start this thing, like the last 3 years, they've been screaming this Russiagate thing. Well, now, in the country, we used to say, if you tell a falsehood, sometime down the road, you're going to have to eat a crow. That's the way we term it. Well, this crow has gotten so big that they're going to have one hell of a meal on this thing. They're not going to be able to eat this one for a week, the way they've done it. And so it's just gotten too much for them to even admit they have a problem.
Too big to fail.
To ignore it.
Too big to fail.
Yeah. Too big to eat.
I like your country wisdom there, Bill. Yeah.
Well, as a country boy, I used to go through the meadows, and I made sure I didn't step in anything.
So I
So I,
No,
could,
it's-
I say I could spot a chip in the field a mile away, and Washington is pitching a lot of chips. If you know what chip pitching is, if you're from the country, you know what that is. They fly like a frisbee. Okay.
It's true.
Yeah, that's right.
We had a question from Kat Terrell in the chat, and she wanted to get your guys' take on what fusion centers are and how they operate. I know we kind of touched on that a little bit, but if we could expand for the benefit of the audience, that would be fantastic.
Okay, every morning I think they come in, they have a meeting. This is what we need to know today. Okay, or they give a series of things they need to know, and each of them goes off to their separate little computers tied into their separate accounts in their home agencies. And then they all make a query in there about this guy or that guy or whatever it is they're going after, and then they all get their stuff. And then they come back together and they start to throw it in the pile and try to merge it together. We had a plan, of course, Ray, to fix that, but they didn't want to hear that back then, so we didn't do that. But we wanted to automatically do all that with software, you know. But they're left doing it manually. That's why everybody has their representatives there and their lines of communications back to their particular data storage facility.
Yeah, and fusion is an apt word here, because things are fused that didn't used to be able to be fused legally. And I'm talking about the kind of stuff that Bill used to work with, intercepts, okay? I'm talking about the kind of foreign intelligence collection that the CIA is supposed to be doing and does do. There used to be guidelines that would prevent, not guidelines, there used to be laws that would prevent the sharing of very sensitive information of this nature with other people without, special authorities or, without taking advantage of loopholes or FISA laws or things like that. Now, that's observed in the apps. They don't worry about that anymore. They're above the law, and they can do parallel construction. If they can do that and brag about it, which they have, do anything. And where's the break on that? Well, you talk about Congressional Intelligence Committee supervising. I mean, what should have been the supervisory function is sort of the overlook committee on the type of, they're overlook, not supervisory thing. And it's just lost its pizzazz. And we're back to where we were in 1974, 75 with the church committee, where some of these reforms were instituted and lasted for longer than I expected to. Now they're debunked.
Let me add one thing if I can here. It's a very important thing. This whole business of parallel construction and collection and violations of the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments by NSA and CIA and the FBI and the DEA, that was challenged in court. And then one case made it to the Supreme Court. It was called Amnesty International versus Clapper. And in order to get this case thrown out of court, the government solicitor general had to lie to the Supreme Court to get it thrown out. He said, yeah, if anybody is in a criminal court and they were used, NSA data was used against them, they'd be told. Well, the truth was no one has ever been told. And that was an outright lie, and they knew it. And so, this is the extent to which they will go to lie internally in the government to cover up the crimes they've been committing. They all talked about, well, Snowden shouldn't have done what he did. He shouldn't have taken what he said, what he did take. Well, if you people in the government, the shadow government, the deep state, I call them the Praetorian Guard, if you hadn't committed all the crimes you've been committing, people wouldn't have to do this. You wouldn't have to have these whistleblowers. They wouldn't have been anything to blow the whistle on. But instead, you let these things fester and continue the crimes and cover them up. It only makes it worse. I mean, it's true for every whistleblower. When whistleblowers show problems, here's a problem. If you fix it, the organization gets better. But if you ignore it, it only festers and gets worse and continues, and you never fix it. And that's the way they've been operating, not only in government, but in industry too. They do the same damn thing. They don't fix things. They just keep them going. you don't embarrass, don't put warts on the management, because the managements they're all really great people, you know.
And Bill, you've had some personal experience with that.
Yeah.
With some guys coming to your house early in the morning. Maybe you could say about a word about what they do to intimidate other whistleblowers, knowing that you weren't the whistleblower.
Well, no, they first of all, the Department of Defense Inspector General, whom we filed a complaint against NSA for violating all kinds of regulations, like Constitution, and also fraud, corruption, and waste. And they, by the way, they found everything we said was true. That whole report said from the DOD IG's office said what was true, but it was suppressed. But at any rate, the point was that when we did that, we went through the proper channels. We went to the Inspector Generals of the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice. We went to the House Intelligence Committee. We stayed in the proper channels as outlined by Senator Feinstein, and all these other idiots who claim that Snowden should have done this too. Well, that's exactly what we did. And we didn't talk to anybody in the New York Times. I'm sorry, the New York Crimes. We didn't do any of that. We didn't commit anything with them. We never talked to them at all. And when they published that warrantless wiretapping article, Lichtblau and Reisen did that in December 2005.
Right.
And then after that, they said, here the DOD IG said, here's some people who complained about this Stellar Wind domestic spying program. They filed a complaint against NSA, and they're probably the whistleblowers. So, and NSA loved that, because that's a way to get retribution out of us for filing that complaint, because I know it caused them a lot of problems. And they're rightly so, because they were criminals. They still are. So and I had a whole list of crimes that I read off with on another program. I didn't have the list here, but it included, the perjury, obstruction of justice, treason, sedition, all kinds of things, all of which there was ample evidence to convict people on. Well, okay, so the whole point was that this whole issue went to the Supreme Court, and they avoided the saying anything about it, because they said, and they lied to the court to make the court believe that everything was still okay, or that they were doing. That's the way they did it, but they still lied. Now, if I was on the Supreme Court, I would have said, these people came in here and lied to me. I'm going to hold them in contempt of the Supreme Court and reinstate the entire case with prejudice against the government. Now, come on back in here and argue your case again, And they didn't do that. Why? I'm sure because, the Supreme Court is one of the main ones they've been spying on all along. So, they watch these people try to get leverage against them. I mean, that's what they do with the parliaments around the world. They do that with everybody. Anybody that has power or influence, they watch them to get something on them so they can say, we own these people.
Bill, you mentioned the Reisen and Lichtblau article, which was the same one I referred to,
Yep.
December 16th, I think, 2005. That was the one that blew this operation, really got it all out there. This is the one they were covering up for 15 or 16 months. Now, you were treated to some early morning visitations from the FBI. Did they suspect that you were one of the leakers that gave that stuff to Reisen?
That's what the Department of Defense Inspector General suggested to them, that we were. And so they took that as saying, yeah, we really want to hit these people,
But did they know who it really was?
Oh, yeah, they knew. They knew it was Thomas Tam. Yeah. Because, you knew that was that. They knew it. And besides, they had all their phone records and email records and all the finance, all that traveling too. They had all that. And they knew we never saw anybody from the New York Crimes. Okay.
So they raided you and your, 4 colleagues? 3 colleagues?
Yep. Simultaneously.
Early morning. What was the date of that?
Well, in my case, though, they came in with guns drawn. They were pointing guns at us.
Well, that's because you're from Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Because you might have a gun there, right?
Yeah.
And
Sure.
you were in the shower, right? you carry a gun in the shower?
No.
No?
Only to keep the shower beer company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So the point here I'm trying to is simply that they knew darn well that it wasn't Binney and his associates that leaked that to Horizon, and they raided him anyway. And why did they raid you anyway, Bill?
Well, it's because we were the ones who filed a complaint against NSA for violating the Constitution and also for corruption, fraud, waste, and abuse.
Yeah, and they wanted to make an example of you to
Yeah.
others. You don't do this anymore. You don't do this ever, okay? And even though they knew you guys weren't the guys, they went after you anyway. So that's what we're up against. That's the deep state on steroids.
I would also point out, though, Ray, that on our monthly newsletter, and NSA publishes monthly newsletters, on the back page there's an article up there at the top of the page that says, report fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption to the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. That's a part of the requirements for being employed by the United States government. So we basically did that, okay? We fulfilled our commitments under the requirements for employment.
So anybody have any questions about the need for Julian Assange and WikiLeaks? I mean, hello.
We found out that Julian Assange got a radio. And I'm assuming he can listen to AM and FM channels out there. And I'm not asking you to do anything on this regard, but I think it would be really cool if a pirate radio station or some kind of station popped up out there specifically to educate Julian about what the public knows about the situation around his case. So I think that that's always worth shouting out because that is some connection he can have to the outside world right now.
I had a quick question about contact tracing. This was something that was addressed in the chat as well. I'm not sure how much time either of you have left, but I did want to get your thoughts on the dangers of contact tracing, because of course we know that this is something that's being discussed and potentially implemented to kind of combat the coronavirus. However, we know historically when these surveillance measures are put in place to deal with a very urgent or seemingly urgent scenario or a crisis, we see these sorts of measures still being in effect years later. So can you talk about maybe your concerns with contact tracing and how that's going to be abused by intelligence agencies and people in positions of power?
It already is. There's several programs. One, of course, that maps out all your relationships, and there's another one called Treasure Map that NSA runs along with other agencies, where the objective of Treasure Map is to trace the location every minute of every day of every device on the network, and also everyone off the network. So what that means is they can take the social networking that they have on everybody in the planet and trace the locations of everybody on the planet every minute of every day. So then they can do a simple geographic proximity to pull people together within, say, a yard or two of each other and say, now I know in every social network in the world who's close to who. And that's already been going on for years. So this is nothing new. That's just another way of saying, let me legalize what I'm already doing, but I'll get an official legal paper saying I can do it now, and now I can talk about it.
Well, and we had in Minneapolis, right after that precinct burned, there were two officials. I can't remember what their official job titles were, but they were giving a press conference and flat out said in front of the camera, we are using contact tracing software to help identify who we think these perpetrators are. And everybody that's done this show went, I told you, because we were out way ahead on this going, here's the potential abuse for it. Here's what we already know is going on. Here's why this is a bad idea. No, don't go join, Gavin Newsom's snitch army. No, don't go join Bill de Blasio's snitch army. Like, just stop. Think about this for a second.
So one of the things with these contact trace apps that really concerns me, especially with them being proliferated to lower and lower levels of law enforcement, is people's ability to get them to use for personal nefarious reasons. And one of the things that comes to my mind, and I'd be interested in kind of getting your opinion of this, just based on all the cyber activity that's gone on recently, is if someone gets into one of these contact tracing networks and is able to get whatever type of information, they could literally do a geolocated distributed denial of service attack to target a specific area instead of a specific corporation or person or government institution or what have you. And we've seen the laziness that the NSA and CIA in particular has when it comes to protecting their cyber arsenal and the different tools that they have at their disposal. Do you see any risk, either of you, of tools like this falling into the wrong hands, so to speak? And is there any talk of that behind the scenes when stuff like this starts to get rolled out?
I would say that it probably already happened. So in other words, nothing new here. I mean, Vault 7 and a lot of the stuff that was compromised out of NSA, the equivalency at NSA, which I think was the mother lode, that the Five Eyes had, and so that stuff's probably already been compromised there. I mean, it went to the some dark company out there, something I can't remember the name of it, but it was, I don't know, the guy had boatloads of data that he took out of NSA, even hard copy paper. I don't know how he ever got it out. What the heck? That would never have happened back when I was working there. You couldn't get out of NSA without getting your property searched. I guess they stopped doing it. I don't know. But at any rate, this guy had closets full of stuff, and gigabytes of data, and all that stuff got out onto the web somewhere. And so I think most of that's already compromised, and yeah, anybody can do anything they want to with it if they can get access to the databases and the data. Okay, they need to be able to do that. So like at NSA, they've got all the geolocational data, all the social networking, everything all in one place, and you just simply write a little software program to go through and pull it all together and associate people. And all the travel, everything is all the traveling that people do, the manifest that comes for airplanes and trains and buses, or not trains, but planes and ships, people coming in and going out of the country and traveling internally in the country. So you can basically see, at least in those environments, who is associated with others in close proximity. And you could use that in any way. And you could do similar things with looking at this was some of the things I wanted to do. Maybe I shouldn't, but I was thinking about laying out the entire network, looking at how the network is switches, all the switches in the network, how they're routing, all the routes, all the potential routes, be able to do the kinds of things I think you were suggesting earlier. But you need to be able to do that, first of all. And once you can do that, then you can begin to see where you might want to attack switches, servers, or whatever. Yeah.
We get yelled at if there's dead air by Sleepy Josh. So.
Oh, okay.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. One question that people like me would have is, okay, they collect everything. Where the hell do they store this stuff? I mean, hello. Where do they put all that in a way that it can be easily retrieved? Do you know the answer to that one, Bill?
Yeah. Actually, it's a number of places. The largest one was built out in Bluffdale. It was a 1 million square foot facility for storage. And I read a little article from Cisco, the people who sold the routers for them to route data to and from the center. And they had estimated that by 2015 that the center there would be taking in 966 exabytes of data per year. Now that's about a zettabyte of data, So I estimated that the total storage capacity there has to be at least 5 zettabytes, which is enough to store everything in the world for, maybe 50 to 100 years. All right, everything in that, that's my estimate of it. Okay. Now I wouldn't, of course, take public television, that broadcast. I wouldn't do that. So you don't, waste space on that. But you take emails, phone calls, things like that, digitize them and store them there. 50 to 100 years.
Are they building any other facilities?
Yeah. The latest one is on Fort Meade. It's 2.5 times the size of the Bluffdale. 2.8 million square feet. And that doesn't count the one, that 600,000 square foot one they have down in San Antonio, Texas, or a one in Denver, or out there in Hawaii, or
Who's paying for all that?
Fort Meade, or all the others around the world.
Who's paying for all this, Bill?
We are.
In a country with fiat currency, where all it takes to create money now that we're off the gold standard is a few keystrokes, and then a chain of numbers shows up at Federal Reserve banks. If our economy is going to be faith-based, then maybe nobody's paying for it, Ray. Maybe it's being built because they're expecting I don't know, to be in the business of ripping our personal information out of thin air and keeping it tucked away in case they need to. Like, I have some qualms with our faith-based monetary system. I do. But man, the server farms for these are just out of control. I know that there are processes being made to make all of this less energy consuming, but can you imagine the electric bill on a server farm that is take, what'd you say, 5 zettabytes?
5 zettabytes.
Well, they're trying to pass the Green New Deal now, so they'll have green surveillance capitalism infrastructure built in place. So
that was only
okay.
Elizabeth Warren got elected. I thought she was gonna drop those green bombs, and the drones were gonna fly on Mamas and the Papas records from 1972, and it was just gonna be a beautiful thing.
So,
a cartoon.
So last question, because we're pretty much at our time limit for this evening. But so as we let you go, if you could provide people a little bit of inspiration, maybe an event that happened in the world, or just something that you look to keep moving forward, but also where people can find you, whether it's on social media, the internet, what have you.
Actually, I'm not in social media, so I don't do Facebook. I refuse to work for free. At Facebook, it takes 1.5 billion people, and that 1.5 billion people, they do all the work, and they scrape off all the money from the advertisement and so on, and compiling data on people, so that they can share it and sell it. I mean, so Facebook is making a lot of money at the expense of everybody using Facebook, and I refuse to do that. So I'm not out there in Facebook. I do some email, but I can't really give you my email on this air, because I get lots of email for nothing. So occasionally I get with Ray, and we do some combined article or something, in Consortium News, or I go on different shows, Ann Vandersteel's show, Bill Still's show, and maybe Jimmy Dore, or different people, basically the non-mainstream media. That's where I am, basically. But you can get me by simply Googling my name. I guess you'll get the latest that way, if I'm active.
Well, I guess I could refer you to my website, which my youngest son runs. He's my webmaster. The website is hard to remember now. I've got a pencil. RayMcGovern.com. It has my email address, it has my Twitter label, and it has my Facebook name or whatever. So be aware that I don't check my Facebook very much, but my son does post things on Twitter and also on Instagram and on Facebook. So one way or another, you can figure out what I'm saying. I publish first on consortiumnews.com, mostly because Bob Perry, the excellent investigative reporter, established that thing 25 years ago, and we are trying our best to carry on his tradition, and we're doing a pretty good job at it. I think we are the only ones where you can look at VIPS memoranda. We have our archive there, and we can see, for example, what we said in December of 2016, already presaging what came out. So, yeah, I'd encourage you to look at my website, raymcgovern.com. You can find the other stuff there as well. Consortium News is, of course, a much wider exposure to good things, not only my stuff, but Bill's and others. And I encourage you to look at them as well. The others, I have to tell you that I used to be on Amy Goodman pretty regularly, a couple times a year at least. And when we started talking about Russiagate being not provable, actually being rather disputable, actually being a fairy tale, all of a sudden I couldn't publish on Truth Out. I couldn't publish on Common Dreams. I couldn't publish on Counterpunch. And Amy Goodman wouldn't let me anywhere near her studio. Now, that's just a few things, okay? But how telling is that, okay? Now, do you think they'll confess and say, oh, sorry, Ray, we were wrong, you guys were right, we'll give you a break? That's not likely to happen. So it's an uphill struggle. But, we have to take some joy in this because we're doing the right thing. And as I.F. Stone, one of my patrons once said, look, you have to go into this business open-minded because you're going to lose. And then you're going to lose. But then you're going to lose some more. But then one fine day, people who have some principles and think the way you do are going to win. And you might not see that day. But meanwhile, do your thing and know that it's all to the good and try to keep some sort of sense of humor to the whole thing. And a lot of it is eminently laughable. And we didn't have enough laughs tonight, but we had a couple. So keep your sense of humor, keep your devotion to the truth, and everything's going to come out eventually, maybe not right away.
The next time you're on, I'll have more jokes.
Yeah. But I was going to say that sometimes that's pretty hard when you can see what happened to Patrick. Ray, what
Patrick
they did.
Barnes. Yeah. He was the one that took our findings in July of 2017 and put them in the Nation. Now, the Nation was still suffering very strongly from HWHW virus. That's Hillary would have won. And their editorial staff revolted. And their management said, oh, well, maybe we'll throw some doubt on Patrick, even though he's been vindicated up the kazoo. Yeah, we'll say it's being looked at again. What they did was throw him under the bus. And all of a sudden, his contributions were no longer welcome, even though he was a regular columnist at The Nation. So that's how bad it is. Patrick is writing for Consortium News right now. And last year, he was judged the best commentator of the whole bunch of us. So, that's what happens. But what we have to do is sort of say, well, success. Dan Berrigan, one of my patrons, used to say success is not unimportant, but it is secondary. It's secondary to the goodness of the act. You do the right thing, and you don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you're doing the right thing, and success maybe in the future is going to be there. Meanwhile, take it with a little humor and a little satisfaction that you're doing the right thing.
Hell yeah.
Well, I would like to thank both of you guys for joining us this evening. For people that are new to the vigils, we stream on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and we will be doing a special stream this Friday in remembrance of Julian Assange's birthday. If you are interested in joining us for that stream, we are looking for members of our Discord to come on the stream with us for a few minutes and just give their thoughts on Julian and his situation. So we look forward to getting that set up with everybody. But you can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. You can find us on Twitter at action_4 Assange. And don't forget to circulate the links for our GoFundMe to help us get to DC, as well as our weekly calls to action that we put out.
I want to thank both of our guests for joining us tonight. I was really happy to also be back for this 1-year anniversary. It's pretty amazing that Andrew and I, first met a year ago, like last month it was a year. And then we kind of put this together and took over where Unity for J left off. And it's been great and wonderful that we're still doing this a year later. And hopefully we won't have to do too much longer. But it was great to be back. Again, I want to thank both guests. If you don't know who I am, I'm Taylor Hudak. I'm not on as regularly as the other two hosts, but I am on when I can be on. And you can find my work at Activism Munich, and you could also follow me on Twitter at _Taylor Hudak. And a big thank you also to Kimber and Josh.
My name's Steve Poikin, and I host a show called Slow News Day, which you can find here on YouTube by typing in Slow News Day Podcast into your search bar. I'm also on Rockfin and DLive, and hoping to be expanding to a couple of other platforms here over the next couple of weeks. Sunday, my guest will be Ryan Christian from The Last American Vagabond. Really looking forward to sitting back down with him. I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning so that I could make myself pretty and then go sit for 2 hours being interviewed by Gordon Dimick. By the way, Ray, Gordon says hello. He's looking forward to being able to speak with you. So that'll be posted soon. Please go check that out. It was like 2 hours of just incredible conversation with Gordon. I love you guys. Thank you for being here with us in the chat crew. Thank you to everyone that gave a super chat. Kate and Ed, and I know Kat anonymously donated to the GoFundMe, but nobody knows which cat I'm talking about. There's like 80 of them. So thank you very much for that, guys. One more time, if you can donate to the GoFundMe, please do. If you can't, please share the link. It is vital that we have as many asses in the streets in September screaming about the potential death of A, an innocent man, and B, investigative journalism. This is serious shit, and we need you to be a part of it with us. Thank you very much, Bill Binney and Ray McGovern. This is fantastic. It feels like Christmas, but without all the familial guilt. So that's nice. Andrew, Taylor, it's great to see you again. I missed your face. I do. I don't, because I watch your stuff on Activism Munich. You know what I mean. Thanks to Sleepy Josh on the 1s and 2s, Mean Panda for the graphics. We will see you Friday evening, and I will see you a little bit earlier because I will be in San Francisco with the Bay Area Committee to defend Julian Assange in front of the British consulate. I'm going to get with Alex Hills about that from Candles for Assange. We'll be live streaming it. Yeah, till next time, guys. Good luck to us all.